The tension wasn't announced. It simmered beneath designer suits and polished marble, behind rehearsed smiles and carefully worded policies. It started with a glance that lasted too long, a question asked too loudly, and a silence that spoke more than any denial. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't break the rules. But that didn't matter. To them, he didn't belong. And in a place built on image, assumption became law. They didn't ask who he was. They assumed what he wasn't. But the irony? The man they humiliated, the one they dragged out in front of cameras and whispers, was the last person they should have underestimated. What they saw as disposable was, in truth, unstoppable. And the reckoning that followed didn't come with outrage. It came with ownership. If this story grabbed you from the first breath, hit like, subscribe for more, and drop a comment below. Where are you watching from? And how do you think you would have reacted in that room? The heavy doors of Dominion Trust Bank opened with a muted swoosh, followed by the sharp tap of leather soles against marble. Thaddeus Holt walked in with a sense of calm authority, every inch of him composed. His charcoal gray suit hugged his broad frame with tailored precision, his pocket square crisp, watch gleaming with understated elegance. He was here for business, finalizing the acquisition of a 4-story commercial building just blocks from the river. A done deal, or so he thought. Inside, the bank exuded the kind of old money ambience that smelled of entitlement. Gold accents on wood paneling, walls lined with modern art, low music that sounded expensive but unrecognizable. Clients sat sipping complimentary coffee in tailored suits and pearl necklaces. As Thaddeus entered, the atmosphere shifted subtly. Heads turned. Conversations stuttered. A pause, too long to be polite, passed through the room. Then it resumed, but the stares lingered. He moved toward the VIP reception, the area reserved for Dominion's executive asset clients, where his appointment had been scheduled for 11 a.m. sharp. He had received a confirmation call just yesterday. The woman on the phone even congratulated him on his new investment. But now, standing in that lush carpeted queue, he could feel it. The silent wall, the friction of presence where others thought he didn't belong. From behind the glass counter, a young banker in a navy vest and power haircut rose. His eyes landed on Thaddeus with a squint that quickly turned guarded. "Sir," he called out, not stepping forward, "I'm going to need to verify your appointment before you proceed." His tone was firm, unnecessarily loud. Thaddeus stopped. "Of course," he replied smoothly, opening his folder. "My name is Thaddeus Holt. I have an 11 a.m. with Mr. Denholm regarding a property trust transfer." The banker didn't take the documents. Instead, he reached for a tablet, eyes flicking between Thaddeus and the screen. Then came the pause. Long, intentional. "I'm not seeing you listed, Mr. Holt," he said finally, glancing up. His voice carried through the room, drawing the attention of a nearby couple. "Are you sure you're not at the wrong location?" Thaddeus blinked, a trace of confusion crossing his face. "This is 55 East Layton Avenue, yes?" "It is." "Then I'm not mistaken. The confirmation call came yesterday. I've done business through Dominion Trust for years. This is the proper branch." The banker leaned forward slightly. "And you're saying you're an executive asset client?" he asked, one brow raised, practically dripping skepticism. "Because that section is strictly for clients managing portfolios over 7 figures." Thaddeus remained calm. "That's correct." The banker gave a thin smile, clearly disbelieving. "If you'd like to take a seat in the standard reception, I'll check again with our coordinator." "No need. I'd rather wait in the VIP area as scheduled." A pause. Then the banker looked over Thaddeus's shoulder and gestured. 2 security guards, one tall and lean, the other wide-shouldered and smirking, approached. "Sir, we're going to have to ask you to step aside while we verify your status," the banker said, louder now. "We have other clients waiting who do have confirmed access." Thaddeus frowned. "I've provided my appointment time. I'm not leaving a line I'm scheduled to be in." That was all the guards needed. The short one stepped in close. "Let's keep this simple, buddy. Step back, we'll sort this out. No reason to cause a scene." "I'm not causing anything," Thaddeus said, still measured. "I'm standing where I'm supposed to be. You can check your records." "Sir, The taller guard interrupted. "We're not going to argue." One hand brushed his shoulder, firm. Thaddeus tensed. Around them, the murmur grew. A woman in pearls whispered to her husband. Another man nearby tilted his phone slightly, recording. "Is there a problem?" someone asked. The banker didn't answer. The guards moved in closer, flanking Thaddeus. "Let's go," one of them snapped. When Thaddeus didn't move immediately, the short one grabbed his arm, not violently, but enough to jolt the entire room into full attention. "Hey," Thaddeus said sharply, "you're making a mistake." "No mistake," the tall one muttered. "This area's not for walk-ins." "I'm not a walk-in," Thaddeus said through gritted teeth, voice low. "I'm a registered client. You need to come with us." "You're making a mistake," Thaddeus said, still composed, though the tension in his voice had grown. "I've done nothing wrong. I have a meeting, and I will not be treated this way." His words, however, fell on deaf ears. The banker at the counter had already turned his back, pulling another file for the next client. That white man, the one in the golf shirt, smiled politely as if nothing had happened, then stepped forward and was greeted with open courtesy. The guards didn't pause to listen. Without another word, they tightened their hold and began pulling Thaddeus toward the main entrance. His shoes scraped against the polished floor, the momentum of their grip overpowering him. "Let go of me," he demanded, but they didn't. He tried to twist his torso to face them, to make eye contact with someone who might understand, but they didn't give him a chance. One of them yanked the folder from under his arm in the process, sending papers scattering across the floor, signed documents, legal forms, proof of his scheduled appointment, all slipping under the velvet ropes and onto the lobby floor like trash. A murmur rippled through the room. Phones were out again. Thaddeus saw the glint of a recording lens pointed his way. A woman gasped. Someone said, "Is that really necessary?" But no one stepped in. The smaller guard's grip shifted from his arm to the back of his collar, twisting the fabric and choking off his breath momentarily. His coat tore near the seam. He stumbled, barely catching himself on the sleek tile with the toe of his shoe. Then, in one violent pull, they dragged him the last few feet, past the glass walls of the bank's meeting rooms, past a row of stunned clients waiting with coffee cups frozen in midair. His watch caught the edge of a low sitting table and snapped free, the glass shattering on the tile below. No one picked it up. A voice behind them, older, female, muttered, "That's what you get." Thaddeus's heart pounded in his chest, not just from the physical handling, but from the eruption of shame and helplessness. He had not raised his voice. He had not trespassed. He had followed every rule. Still, here he was, being treated like a criminal. When they reached the front entrance, one of the guards leaned into the glass panel and pushed it open with his shoulder. With a final shove, they deposited him outside like an object that had no place inside those walls. His papers, crumpled and creased, fluttered down the steps behind him. He bent down slowly, his hands trembling, not from fear, but from fury buried under the layers of control he had practiced his whole life. As he reached for the folder, a voice called out from the sidewalk. "Hey man," someone said, holding up a phone and smirking. "You're gonna go viral. Look up, smile for the camera." Thaddeus didn't respond. His throat tightened, but he stood. He gathered what he could, tried to smooth the documents, then turned to face the glass doors again. Inside, he saw the same banker laughing lightly with another customer, entirely unbothered. One of the guards looked out at him, eyes cold, daring him to try coming back. On the sidewalk, another pedestrian who had just witnessed the entire thing nudged his friend and said loud enough to be heard, "Must have been trying to scam the place. These guys are always trying something." He had done nothing wrong. Yet in the span of 10 minutes, he had gone from respected client to public nuisance. And now people were filming him from the safety of their distance, like he was some unruly sideshow. That's when the first police cruiser rolled up. The red and blue lights weren't flashing, but the presence alone made heads turn. A second cruiser followed within seconds. Thaddeus straightened his shoulders, already knowing how this was going to go. Two officers stepped out of the first vehicle, both white, both moving with the unhurried confidence of men who expected to be obeyed. One of them, the older of the two, adjusted his belt as he walked up the steps, eyes immediately locking onto Thaddeus. "Sir, we got a call about a disturbance inside the bank," he said flatly. "We're going to need you to step away from the building." Thaddeus gestured to the folder in his hand, keeping his voice low and composed. "Officers, I had an appointment. I'm a client. They dragged me out without cause. My name is Thaddeus Holt. I have the documents right here to prove it." The second officer, younger and already impatient, stepped forward. "Sir, we're not here to debate. You're loitering. Step back or we'll have to detain you." "Loitering," Thaddeus repeated. "I was just inside for a scheduled meeting. They assaulted me. I haven't broken any laws. I want to file a report." The older officer held up a hand. "File a report? About what? Getting asked to leave private property? They said you were causing a disturbance. Refusing to comply. Raising your voice. That checks out." Thaddeus's mouth went dry. "No, it does not. I remained calm the entire time. They grabbed me without warning." "They say otherwise," the younger cop said. "Security said you were uncooperative, tried to push your way into the VIP area. You don't just get to go where you want because you feel entitled." "I was invited. I had an appointment with Mr. Denholm." "You got proof of that?" the older officer asked. Thaddeus opened his folder slowly, showing the papers, the email confirmation, the signed investment forms, the printed itinerary with his name and the Dominion Trust logo. The cop took a brief glance, then snorted. "Anyone can print this crap. Doesn't mean it's real." "Excuse me?" Thaddeus asked, trying to steady his voice. "These are legal documents. You can call the contact number. You can verify it." "You think we got time to verify your meeting schedule?" the younger cop snapped. "You're standing outside a bank looking agitated. That's a security risk." "Agitated?" Thaddeus repeated, dumbfounded. "I was dragged out. They tore my coat, smashed my watch. This is the result of their actions, not mine." "And now you're refusing to leave," the older one added. "You're escalating. You want to get cuffed? Because that's where this is headed." The two officers stepped closer, one of them already unclipping a pair of handcuffs from his belt. A few people on the sidewalk began filming again. Someone across the street laughed. "Just leave, man," a voice called out. "You're not helping yourself." Thaddeus backed up a single step, raising his hand slightly, folder still open in one hand. "I'm not resisting. I'm not refusing. I'm explaining what happened." "You've got about 10 seconds to walk away before we make you," the younger cop warned. "Don't think being polite's gonna save you." The words hit harder than any shove. Thaddeus looked between the two officers, neither of whom had even tried to contact the bank, to ask for witness statements, to verify his story. He looked down at the paperwork again, creased, dirt smudged from the concrete, but still legal, still real, and completely meaningless in their eyes. Slowly, he closed the folder. "Fine," he said, voice flat now. "I'll leave." "Smart choice," the older cop muttered. "You can try your luck with a complaint later." The video had gone viral. Someone had uploaded it to a public platform with a caption that read, "Man tries to force his way into bank VIP lounge, gets dragged out." Within hours, it had racked up tens of thousands of views. By morning, it would be on every major social feed. But the worst part wasn't the view count. It was the comments. He scrolled through them, each one slicing deeper than the last. "Should have known better. Play stupid games. Entitled thug trying to scam the bank. He's lucky they didn't arrest him on the spot. They should have done worse." There were hundreds, some more brutal, some openly racist, referencing everything from his skin color to assumptions about his background. A few tried to defend him, asking for context, asking for facts. But their voices were buried. The clip itself showed no lead-up, no confrontation, no dialogue. Only the moment when Thaddeus was seized by the guards, the scattered documents falling like debris, his body dragged stiffly across the marble floor. It played on a loop, in short, humiliating cycles. No one saw the appointment confirmation. No one heard the banker's sarcasm or saw the moment the police refused to even read his paperwork. And no one cared. That afternoon, the local news ran the story. The headline on screen read, "Security Incident at Dominion Trust. Man removed after causing disturbance. The anchor wore her usual polished smile as she narrated over the footage. The incident occurred at Dominion Trust Bank, where a man, identified as 38-year-old Thaddeus Holt, was escorted out by security after refusing to leave the VIP client area. The video aired again, this time with blurred faces, but Thaddeus's figure was unmistakable. The anchor continued. According to statements from bank officials, Mr. Holt became agitated after being asked to verify his identity and attempted to force his way into a restricted section. Authorities were called and arrived on scene, but no charges were filed. Thaddeus leaned back in his chair, the breath leaving his lungs like it had been stolen. That was their version, their truth. They had erased the part where he presented credentials. They omitted the violent dragging, the ripped coat, the threats. They painted him as the aggressor, the one who wouldn't comply. A few hours later, the bank released its official statement. It spread quickly through business publications and corporate media accounts. At approximately 11 a.m. today, Dominion Trust Bank staff encountered an individual who attempted to access a secured client service area without proper identification. When asked to wait while his information was verified, the individual refused and raised his voice, making multiple staff members feel unsafe. In accordance with protocol, security was called to escort him out. Dominion Trust has a strict policy regarding the safety and privacy of its clients and employees, and we take any breaches seriously. It ended with a familiar, meaningless line: "We remain committed to equality, diversity, and respectful service for all." Thaddeus stared at the words. Staff felt unsafe. He raised his voice. Not one of those things had happened. He hadn't shouted. He hadn't demanded. He hadn't even stepped out of line until they forced him to. The lie burned deeper than the bruises forming on his arms. He looked down at the watch he had set on the table, the cracked face reflecting the light in crooked angles. A reminder, a symbol, the kind of thing that would never appear in any of their statements. His phone buzzed again. A journalist he didn't know sent a message. "Would you like to give your side of the story?" Thaddeus woke the next morning to a growing storm. His phone had nearly overheated from the constant stream of notifications. His email inbox was flooded, and the video of his forced removal had crossed the threshold from viral moment to national news. But it was still the same story being told. A man who tried to push into a space where he didn't belong. A man who got what he deserved. The narrative was so complete, so polished, that he could feel the weight of it pressing on his chest like a second skin. He tried calling Dominion Trust's corporate line, requesting a formal copy of the surveillance footage, something to prove his innocence, but each response was evasive. The operator told him to leave a message. The legal department never picked up. The system was locked shut. Then, on the third day, he received a strange email. No subject line, just a message. "Check this out. You didn't deserve what they did." Attached was a file. The address had no name, just a string of characters that meant nothing to him. Thaddeus hesitated, heart racing. This could be a prank, a setup, a virus. But he clicked. What loaded was a security camera feed, grainy, black and white, with a timestamp that read the day of the incident, 10:57 a.m., just 3 minutes before the confrontation. It showed Thaddeus walking through the VIP line, calm, composed, his documents in hand. There was no aggression, no shouting, no attempt to push through. It then cut to the banker walking away from his post, whispering to someone off-screen. Moments later, the two guards appeared. They didn't pause. They didn't speak to him. They grabbed him within seconds of approaching. Thaddeus watched the footage again, his mouth dry. It was clear, undeniable. The original video that had gone viral was missing this part. The world had seen only the result, not the provocation. Now, for the first time, he had proof. That afternoon, another message came. This time with a name. "My name's Devin. I'm an intern at Dominion. I saw what happened, and it didn't sit right with me. They're lying. Everyone knows it. I found more. Check the link." The link led to a hidden archive of internal memos, whistleblower complaints, and digital case logs that were never meant to be public. There were at least 6 separate incidents over the last 4 years involving Black or Latino clients who reported mistreatment at Dominion Trust branches across the country. Most were settled quietly with non-disclosure agreements. Some never even made it to mediation. The memos were marked confidential. Phrases like client misinterpreted policy enforcement and handled internally popped up repeatedly. In one email thread, a manager explicitly advised a subordinate to flag clients who don't meet our image criteria for closer observation. Thaddeus's stomach turned. It was systemic, not just a one-time failure, not just a rogue guard or an overzealous banker. This was embedded in the culture. His case wasn't unique. It was just the one that happened to be filmed. That night, he reached out to Devin. The voice on the other end was young, nervous, but resolute. "I just couldn't sit on it," Devin said. "They told us during onboarding to always smile, always be polite, but they also said to notify security if we saw someone who looked out of place." No one said it out loud, but everyone knew what that meant. "Why me?" Thaddeus asked. "Why send this to me?" Devin paused. "Because they're going to bury it, and no one in that building is going to stop them. But you still can." Thaddeus didn't know what to say. He had spent the past few days drowning under the weight of false narratives, crushed by the silence of institutions that were supposed to uphold the truth. But here, finally, was someone inside who still cared. Someone who believed facts mattered more than perception. He spent the rest of the night compiling what Devin had sent. He compared dates, built a timeline, extracted names, matched them to online profiles, and slowly began to construct a full picture. He saved the videos to 3 hard drives. He printed the documents and locked them in a fireproof box. He wasn't going to let them twist this into another episode of misunderstanding. He had been patient. He had been quiet. But that part of him was dying. A different voice, one long buried, was beginning to stir. A voice that didn't ask permission to be seen. Thaddeus spent the following morning organizing every piece of evidence he had received from Devin. His desk became a war room. Folders, timelines, USB drives, and printed internal communications arranged in a methodical grid. He had never intended to wage a public campaign, but Dominion Trust had declared that war when they destroyed his name. Now, with evidence of a systemic pattern of discrimination, the question wasn't if he should act, it was how. He consulted with a civil rights attorney, a former federal prosecutor named Camille Redding, who had built her reputation exposing institutional misconduct. They met in her firm's glass conference room. The Chicago skyline sprawled behind her like a challenge. She reviewed the footage and documents silently, her face unreadable. When she finally looked up, her expression was stern. "This is strong," she said, tapping a memo with the words "Client Profile Review" for appearance consistency underlined in red. "But you need to understand what you're walking into." Thaddeus didn't flinch. "I'm not afraid of bad press." Camille leaned forward. "It's not about press. Dominion's legal team isn't made of amateurs. They're connected to political donors. They fund campaigns. They sponsor media outlets. If you try to go public, they won't just try to discredit you. They'll erase you. Financially, reputationally, personally." Thaddeus nodded slowly. "I'm not doing this for attention. I'm doing it because they'll do it again to someone else." Camille's eyes softened slightly. "I'll represent you. But you need to prepare. This won't be about justice. It'll be about endurance." That night, after sending out a secure email to a journalist he trusted, Thaddeus noticed something that made his skin tighten. A black SUV was parked across the street from his home. At first, he thought it was coincidence. It could have belonged to a neighbor. But the next night, it was there again, in the same spot, engine off, windows dark. And the night after that, it returned, this time idling with its headlights off. He watched from behind his blinds, chest pounding. He considered calling the police, but stopped himself. What would he even say? That a car was parked legally on the street? That someone might be watching him? The same authorities who had sided against him just days ago wouldn't suddenly become his allies. On the 4th morning, he found a plain envelope in his mailbox. No name, no return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper with 5 words typed in bold. "Next time, it won't be your dignity they take." Thaddeus sat in silence for several minutes, staring at the note. His hands were steady, but his pulse thundered. The message was unmistakable. They knew where he lived. They wanted him to know they were watching. They expected him to fold. He took the note to Camille. She had seen similar tactics before, never confirmed, always deniable. "You should consider going dark," she said. "Step back. Let the story fade. You've got a life to protect." Thaddeus looked her straight in the eye. "And what about the people who never had a life to protect? The ones who never made it out of those rooms?" He thought of the names buried in Devin's documents. The black woman labeled unstable after she tried to close a business account. The Latino man flagged as a security concern for speaking Spanish on his phone in the VIP lounge. Their cases had disappeared into arbitration and silence. No headlines, no apologies. He wasn't going to be another file buried in a locked cabinet. That evening, Thaddeus backed up every piece of evidence to 3 secure servers in 3 different states. He gave copies to Camille, one to his brother across the country, and one to a nonprofit legal group specializing in racial justice. Then he began to prepare a video statement, not one of rage, but of clarity. He dressed simply, sat at his desk, and looked directly into the camera. "My name is Thaddeus Holt. What happened to me at Dominion Trust Bank was not an isolated incident. It was part of a pattern, a system. I have the evidence, and I'm not afraid to show it. If something happens to me, if I disappear from public view, the files are already in trusted hands. They will be released. This isn't just about me. This is about every person who's been told they don't belong because of how they look, not what they've earned." When he finished recording, he uploaded the video to 3 platforms, scheduled to go live if he didn't manually cancel them within 72 hours. He looked out the window. The SUV was gone, but the tension in his chest remained. He knew what he was risking, but he also knew the price of silence. He wouldn't pay it. Not again. His posture was calm, his expression unreadable, but there was something different in his stance, a stillness born not of resignation but control. This time, he wasn't alone. At his side stood Camille Redding, his attorney, dressed in a sharp navy suit with documents tucked neatly into her briefcase. Beside her was a Cook County Sheriff's deputy, stoic and silent, badge gleaming. Just behind them, 2 members of Thaddeus's media team checked equipment, testing mics and camera angles. They had arrived early, positioning their crew across the street with clear instructions: capture everything. Thaddeus adjusted the cuffs of his blazer. It was deep black, newly tailored, and paired with a simple silver tie. He looked every bit the man they had failed to see 2 weeks earlier. But this time, they would see him. He took a breath, nodded to Camille, and led the group across the street. As the glass doors of Dominion Trust parted with a quiet hum, silence fell over the lobby. The receptionist at the front desk stood up abruptly, eyes flicking from Thaddeus to the deputy, to the camera crew now stepping in behind them. The same junior banker who had accused him weeks ago rose from behind his desk, color draining from his face. "Can I help you?" he stammered. Camille stepped forward, calm and composed. "We're here to deliver official notice of building transfer ownership. This branch of Dominion Trust is operating out of a property it no longer owns." The banker blinked. "What are you talking about?" Thaddeus reached into his briefcase, pulled out the notarized deed, and laid it on the counter with deliberate precision. Effective last Friday, this property was sold to a limited liability corporation, Pinnacle Urban Assets. I am the principal owner. As of this moment, you are operating in a space that belongs to me. The lobby fell silent. A client standing nearby paused mid-sip of his coffee. The receptionist slowly lowered the phone she had picked up to call for backup. One of the guards, the short one who had dragged Thaddeus out, stood frozen near the side hallway, mouth half open. Thaddeus looked directly at him and said nothing. Camille handed the banker an envelope. Inside you'll find the eviction notice. As per Illinois commercial lease law, you have 30 days to vacate unless a new lease is negotiated. Any further operations beyond that period without authorization will be considered trespassing. This has to be a mistake, the banker said, voice cracking. Our legal team, this isn't even possible. Thaddeus finally spoke, voice low but steady. 2 months ago, your parent company quietly listed several downtown holdings for private sale to raise capital. A private firm made the purchase offer, which was accepted without knowing who stood behind it. That firm was mine. You didn't see me coming because you never even considered I could be the one holding the pen. Murmurs spread across the floor. Employees stepped from behind desks. The tall security guard, the one who hadn't said much during the dragging, slowly walked toward them, eyes flicking from Thaddeus to the sheriff's deputy, unsure of what to do. The banker still refused to move. You can't just show up with a camera crew and act like you own the place. Camille raised an eyebrow. We don't have to act. We do own it. And I suggest you be careful how you speak to your new landlord. The cameras continued rolling, capturing every word, every facial twitch, every visible sign of panic and realization. A woman in a pantsuit emerged from one of the back offices, clearly a manager, and rushed to the front. What is this? What's happening here? She asked breathlessly. Thaddeus turned to her. Your company chose to believe lies over evidence, to protect image over integrity. I gave you every chance to do the right thing. You dragged me out of here, humiliated me, called the police. There was no mistaking the authority in his posture or the calm resolve in his expression. He wasn't there for revenge. He was there for clarity, and clarity hit harder than any act of retaliation ever could. The camera crew silently captured each moment, every angle, every word, while passers-by pressed their faces against the glass walls of the bank, whispering, recording, or pointing. Outside, word had begun to spread. The same social feeds that had once mocked Thaddeus with twisted narratives and racist captions were now lighting up with something new: awe, shock, and poetic justice. Clips of Thaddeus delivering the eviction notice hit the internet before he even left the building. One was titled "The Return of the Rightful Owner." Another, "Man dragged out of bank now owns it." Thousands of users shared it within minutes. The guards who had once laid hands on him stood still, watching in silence. The shorter one looked down, shifting awkwardly near the lobby doors, pretending to adjust his belt. The taller one, the one who had first grabbed Thaddeus's arm, kept his back straight, but his eyes refused to meet Thaddeus's. They were both still in uniform, but the weight of the moment had stripped them of authority. Their badges didn't protect them from truth. A few feet away, the branch manager, still clutching the envelope Camille had handed her, was frozen in a mixture of denial and shame. She had just finished calling corporate when the sheriff reminded her that the ownership documents were real, enforceable, and filed. Camille read from the legal statute aloud, confirming their authority. The bank's usual buzz had vanished. Phones stopped ringing. Clients stopped speaking. The only sound was the rhythmic hum of the air conditioning and the constant whir of the camera's motor as it rolled. One older client, a man in a beige trench coat and expensive scarf, approached Thaddeus cautiously. "Is this for real?" he asked. Thaddeus nodded. "It is." "Good," the man said simply, then turned and walked away. Moments later, another client stood, this one a young woman who had been filming discreetly. She put her phone away, looked Thaddeus in the eye, and said, "Thank you for coming back." Then she left. It wasn't just justice. It was vindication, felt in every breath. Dominion Trust had orchestrated a narrative, polished it, distributed it, defended it. Now that narrative was unraveling under the bright, undeniable weight of fact. What they once tried to bury was now being played on every news outlet across the country. By late afternoon, national media picked up the footage. The same morning talk shows that had read the bank's initial statement with such certainty were now airing side-by-side comparisons. The first viral video stripped of context, and the new footage showing Thaddeus composed, clear, unshaken as he handed the legal documents over to the same establishment that once humiliated him. The contrast was stark, undeniable. Thaddeus's video statement, the one he had prepared days earlier, was released shortly after the story broke again. "I return today not with anger, but with truth," he said in the video. "When the system fails to protect dignity, When perception is used to replace facts, the only remedy is to bring everything into the light. I am that light now. By evening, his inbox was full. Civil rights organizations, investors, political figures, and ordinary citizens sent messages of solidarity, apology, gratitude. Some offered donations. Others asked to share their own stories of discrimination inside financial institutions. Camille sorted through media requests, vetting the interviews, controlling the narrative that Thaddeus now owned. But for Thaddeus, the most profound moment came not from the media frenzy, not from the likes and shares, but from the way people inside the bank looked at him as he turned to leave. Not with the manufactured politeness of customer service or the cold stares of suspicion, but with quiet, reluctant respect. Some lowered their eyes in shame. Others simply watched him pass, knowing they had misjudged him, participated in something shameful, even if only through silence. Outside, the crowd that had gathered now stood in quiet admiration. A few clapped as he stepped onto the sidewalk. News anchors, who had once parroted the bank's version of events, now demanded accountability. Journalists uncovered inconsistencies in the official statements released by Dominion's corporate office. Their timeline of events didn't match the leak footage, and their claim that Thaddeus refused to identify himself unraveled under scrutiny. Business publications shifted from calling the incident a misunderstanding to labeling it a corporate scandal. The pressure reached Dominion Trust's executive board within 72 hours. Stockholders began calling emergency meetings, demanding an internal review, and asking hard questions about the public backlash and the financial damage being done to the company's reputation. Major clients pulled their funds, citing ethical concerns. Some institutional investors released formal statements condemning the bank's actions, and the dominoes began to fall. Within 1 week, the bank's regional vice president was dismissed. His quiet departure was followed by the sudden resignation of the public relations chief, whose internal emails leaked online, revealing her attempts to spin the incident to minimize blowback. A day later, both security guards who had forcibly removed Thaddeus were officially terminated. Their personnel files, previously sealed, were obtained by investigative journalists and showed multiple prior complaints of excessive force and racially biased behavior, complaints that had been closed without resolution. The dominoes didn't stop there. One mid-level branch manager in Detroit was placed on administrative leave after a black entrepreneur shared a similar story of being denied service despite verified credentials. A retired teacher in Dallas posted her own account, nearly identical to Thaddeus's, of being ignored and then escorted out when she insisted on speaking to a loan officer. Within 10 days, over 24 new testimonies surfaced from across the country. Each of them followed a pattern. Minority clients treated with suspicion, security called without cause, meetings denied, accounts delayed, and complaints dismissed. Civil rights groups amplified these stories. National television panels debated whether Dominion Trust's culture reflected a broader industry-wide pattern. The pressure reached Capitol Hill. Several senators, including members of the Banking Committee, demanded a federal review. Then, the moment Thaddeus and Camille had anticipated arrived. The Department of Justice announced a formal investigation into Dominion Trust's history of discriminatory practices. A press release from the DOJ cited credible evidence of a systemic pattern of racial bias in client treatment and internal policy enforcement. Investigators requested access to hiring records, complaint logs, internal memos, and security footage from multiple branches. The company's legal team scrambled, issuing denials and vague promises of internal review, but the damage was done. Subpoenas were issued. Whistleblowers began to come forward anonymously. Devin, the intern who had originally leaked the footage, was granted protection and interviewed by federal agents. He described a work culture built on coded language and unwritten rules. He detailed how management encouraged staff to profile clients based on appearance, tone, and behavior, all without directly stating race, but with the same result. Internally, the panic was palpable. Executives met behind closed doors, public relations firms were hired, and spin campaigns were launched. But none of it could overpower the visual truth of Thaddeus standing in that lobby, calm and unwavering, reclaiming the very space from which he had once been dragged. Thaddeus did not gloat. He declined multiple interview requests. He released only one statement during this phase. This was never about one man and one bank. It was about how truth demands to be seen, even when it's inconvenient. I will let the facts speak for themselves. As federal investigators continued their probe, Dominion Trust's public image deteriorated. In the months that followed the Justice Department's investigation and the internal collapse at Dominion Trust, something unexpected began to take root. A shift, quiet at first, but unmistakable. Where there had once been silence, there were now apologies. Where there had once been deflection, there was accountability. It started with Devin, the intern whose conscience sparked the unraveling of the institution's lies. After receiving protection under whistleblower statutes, he appeared in a televised interview, not for fame, but for clarity. "I watched it happen," he said plainly, voice steady. "And I said nothing. At first, because I thought I had no power. But silence isn't neutrality, it's participation." His words resonated far beyond the banking industry. Within days, former Dominion Trust employees from across the country began speaking out. Some issued handwritten letters. Others shared anonymous statements through advocacy groups. Several posted videos of their own, raw, unedited, and honest. The junior banker who first confronted Thaddeus in the lobby uploaded a video from his apartment, pale-faced and remorseful. "I believed I was just following protocol," he admitted. "But what I really followed was fear, assumptions. I made a judgment without basis, and it destroyed someone's dignity. I'm sorry, Mr. Holt. I don't expect forgiveness, but I needed to say it publicly." The security guard who had laughed while dragging Thaddeus out posted a formal apology. In his statement, he described a work culture that rewarded aggression and tolerated profiling. "We were trained to watch certain people differently. No one said it out loud, but we knew. I failed to see the man in front of me that day. All I saw was what I was conditioned to see." These admissions didn't erase the damage, but they shifted the public conversation. Instead of a single man against a corporation, it became a national dialogue about complicity, about the architecture of systemic bias, and about the human cost of institutional silence. Thaddeus remained a steady presence through it all. He declined most interview requests, choosing instead to focus on something bigger than personal vindication. Working closely with Camille and a coalition of civil rights advocates, economists, and former banking professionals, he launched the Holt Initiative for Financial Equity, a national program designed to expose and dismantle racial barriers within the financial system. The initiative offered education, legal support, and consulting services to minority-owned businesses and individuals seeking to challenge discriminatory practices in lending and account management. It wasn't just a nonprofit, it was a movement. And in a surprising turn of events, Dominion Trust, now under new leadership and partially restructured by court orders, became its largest funder. The bank, in a public statement approved by federal regulators, admitted systemic failings and pledged $100 million over 5 years to support financial equity programs. They also agreed to mandatory annual audits, diversity benchmarks, and public transparency reports. The building that had once been a symbol of exclusion now housed the headquarters of the Holt Initiative. Thaddeus had repurposed the very space that had tried to erase him. Gone were the velvet ropes and frosted partitions. In their place stood open offices, public resource areas, and a seminar hall where workshops were held weekly for underserved communities. Children from local schools visited on field trips. Entrepreneurs met with mentors. The space buzzed with purpose, not judgment. One morning, nearly a year after the incident, Thaddeus stood before a crowd in that hall. Community leaders, financial advisors, journalists, and ordinary citizens filled the room. He spoke without notes, without pretense. "What happened to me," he said, "was never about one bad actor or one bad day. It was about what happens when systems are left unchecked, when silence is rewarded, and truth is denied a seat at the table. But today, we've built a new table. One that doesn't ask how you look, before it listens. One that doesn't make you prove your worth before acknowledging your humanity. He paused, letting the weight of that settle. Justice is not a moment. It's a process, a choice. Every day, and today we choose better. The applause was quiet at first, then rose to something thunderous, not because it was loud, but because it was real. Among the crowd were people who had once worked against him, who now worked beside him. Camille stood off to the side, proud but silent. Devin recorded the moment with his phone, smiling faintly. And the banker who had once doubted Thaddeus now worked as a community liaison, helping to bridge the gaps he once helped widen. Change had not come easily. It had not come quickly. But it had come because one man refused to let humiliation be the end of his story. Because he chose not to vanish, but to rise, not to return fire with fire, but to return injustice with undeniable truth. Dominion Trust, once a fortress of exclusion, had become a lesson written in glass and stone. And Thaddeus Holt, the man they had once dragged out like a criminal, stood at its heart, not as a victim, but as its reckoning, its reform, and its reminder. The end. If you enjoyed this story and want to see more powerful narratives like it, make sure to like and subscribe. Your support helps bring these stories to life. I'd love to hear your thoughts. What did you think of the plot twists? Did the ending hit the way you expected? And where are you watching from? Drop a comment below and let's talk about it.